In 1964, Senator Barry Goldwater of Arizona, who was the Republican candidate for president, once said, quote unquote, extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice, and moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue. What's interesting about it was that at that time, Barry Goldwater was considered an extremist figure, a very misunderstood figure in a lot of ways. So misunderstood that people today on the liberal left or the progressive end of the political spectrum think better of Barry Goldwater than they did at the time. And Barry Goldwater, in my view, unintentionally sparked what was negative about the Republican Party. I didn't think he wanted the Republican Party to evolve the way it evolved, but that was kind of the beginning where there was the alignment thing that was going on. Again, something that it was not intended on his part. And we all are human beings, and we all make mistakes, and things that we do end up having rippling effects. Now, as critical as I am of Bill and Hillary Clinton, when they got involved with the Democratic Leadership Council, and in my view, Reaganized the Democratic Party in the 1980s and 1990s, I don't think that their intention was to go and turn the Democratic Party into basically transform it into a 1970s era Rockefeller Republican wing of the Republican Party, and putting that as the identity of the Democratic Party, but that's what in effect happened. And so, with the extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice, and moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue. This is why, if you want to classify Bernie Sanders as a Democrat, because he ran in 2016 and 2020, and he caucuses with the Democrats. Bernie Sanders, what he's tried to do and where the corporate Democrats have stood in his way, puts Bernie Sanders in the same area as Barry Goldwater in 1964. Although I think that Bernie Sanders, what he's trying to do is to build a social democratic movement, and if it goes swimmingly well like he wants, then it's worth it. If it ends up with just Bernie bros like myself and all the other leftists kind of becoming foot soldiers for the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party continues the shenanigans, it continues, then it's kind of like, what's the use? But let me get to Bernie Sanders. What Bernie Sanders meant to me. Bernie Sanders, he got elected in 1990 as the first socialist since the days of Victor Berger of the Socialist Party of America. Victor Berger being the first socialist elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 1910. And he served on and off because he had his position as a congressman taken away from him by the U.S. government for his opposition to World War I, but he was eventually able to get his seat back, and he served until 1929, his death. Bernie Sanders, as I said, became the first socialist since Victor Berger to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives. The irony is that Bill Clinton, who got elected in 1992 by shifting the Democratic Party away from what was considered to ineptly progressive party to begin with, he shifted the party in such a direction that the party platform and the party itself and Bill Clinton himself was almost indistinguishable from George Herbert Walker Bush. Basically, he was George Herbert Walker Bush with a Kennedy-like persona, with a Southern accent that was slightly more liberal on a few, say, social issues than George Herbert Walker Bush himself. Um, the Democratic Party under Bill Clinton moved to the what they call, I say, moved to the right. Um, and because of Bill Clinton's support for things like NAFTA, the crime bill, coming up with a health care plan to retain private health insurance, whereas previously the Democratic Party were more or less in favor of Medicare for all or single payer health care. They called it national health insurance at one time. The Democratic Party moved away from that because they don't want to be called socialists. And as the Democratic Party tried to have this "we're not liberal, we're not liberal" attitude, the Democrats lost both houses of Congress in 1994 for the first time since the 1950s. And this whole "we're new Democrats, we're not those old New Deal troublemakers, we're new Democrats now. We don't need those unions, and and we're a pro-business party." That attitude, and I don't mean pro, free enterprise. I mean they became a corporate party, corporate yuppie-fied party. Um, I turned to a socialist. It's amazing how Rush Limbaugh was calling Bill Clinton a socialist. I didn't see the socialism that Bill Clinton was supposedly advocating. I became a socialist at that time. You could say that Bernie Sanders and Bill Clinton both turned me into a socialist in different ways. Bill Clinton turned me into a socialist because he was, to me, almost a moderate Republican the way he governed. He actually governed to the right of Richard Nixon. Bernie Sanders, I saw what he was doing and being an open socialist in Vermont and reading up about him. And I was just thinking, wow, you know, he's actually talking about issues that Democrats used to advocate and they're too scared to talk about it anymore. Bernie Sanders is bold and in your face about it. I was just like, this guy is he rocks. So I was inspired by Bernie Sanders in a lot of ways. I'm repeating myself. I'm sorry. But once becoming a socialist, I never looked back. And the Democratic Party kept on with their DLC, Democratic Leadership Council bullshit. And as I was getting more frustrated with the Democratic Party, I looked into alternatives. My flavor of the month in the 1990s were including the New Party. I was in the New Party. It kind of evolved into the Working Families Party eventually. Um, the Labor Party, which was a flavor of the month. I love the idea of a Labor Party as a concept. Unfortunately, this Labor Party kind of, except in South Carolina, the Labor Party pretty much kind of went into disarray. The Greens, I have been voting Green on and off since the 1990s. I actually was able to register as a Green. I've been in and out of Democratic Socialists of America since 1997, and in 1996, for many years, for about 10 years, I was a member of the Socialist Party USA. Actually, founded one of the more active chapters in the country here in North Carolina. We actually had set a foothold in the South, and we even had limited press coverage, and we were recognized as an activist organization with involved in many projects. I'm very proud of some of the achievements we achieved. Well, anyway, I don't want to make this about me. Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama during those years. It was, as I said, it just seemed very bleak. The country either went Republican, crazy right, or Democrat centrist, third way, watered down liberalism, and it was very frustrating, very frustrating. And Bernie Sanders decided to run for president in 2016, entering his name in the Democratic primaries to challenge Hillary Clinton and to challenge the third way and actually bring Ideas have been suppressed for decades back into the national conversation. They hated that. I loved it. I mean, no longer was I considered a weirdo. I mean, I'm a weirdo, but political positions were not considered extreme and fringe as it was previously. After cheating by Hillary Clinton and the DNC, Bernie Sanders was cheated the first time, as he was the second time 4 years later. Um, he was, they blamed him for Donald Trump winning the election. And Bernie Sanders, I believe, believes in his heart of hearts that the Democratic Party establishment were correct, that he is partially the reason why Trump won. And I want to say that's not the reason why Trump won. Part of the reason Trump won was that Hillary Clinton would not campaign in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Ohio. Those were the states that tilted in Donald Trump's favor, and people were frustrated with their jobs leaving, and they were frustrated with the politicians of both parties not giving a damn. So someone like Donald Trump come along with some populist rhetoric. There were bad people that voted for Donald Trump. Make no mistake, there were actual bad people that voted for Donald Trump. But there was a lot of people that voted for Donald Trump. Voted for Barack Obama twice. That did not have a bigoted bone in their body, but felt like they were being taken for granted by a Democratic Party who's supposedly for worker rights, but don't do a damn thing other than pay lip service when it's convenient. And that's how they felt shafted. And they felt like, well, they tossed the dice, so to speak, and they felt like they had nothing to lose by voting for Donald Trump. I think it was a mistake on their part. And once Donald Trump became president, he pretty much governed like an establishment Republican in most areas. So much so that someone like Ben Shapiro, who was a never Trumper in 2016, enthusiastically voted for Trump in 2020. And I have said this before, the worst kind of political persons around, other than the nasty racist assholes on the alt-right, are your typical neocon establishment Republicans who were never Trumpers in 2016, that said fuck Trump in 2016, but were all of a sudden very impressed and loved the right-wing policies of Donald Trump, the garden variety movement conservative policies that would give multiple orgasms to the Heritage Foundation. Well, those never Trumpers became Trump sycophants and voted for Trump enthusiastically in 2020. So that crowd, I would say, will be probably as not as nasty as the alt right, but probably next in line as far as the type of people. Now, those who were libertarian leaning, that just think all Democrats are socialists, or those who just vote for an R beside their name because that's part of their tradition, or those that felt truly like Trump was more populist than either Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden, and those Democrats, the kinds that voted for Perot in the 1990s, and even some that voted for Bill Clinton enthusiastically in the 1990s, that felt like that the Democratic Party lost their way, stuck with Trump. And so, but Bernie Sanders was blamed for it, and Bernie Sanders seemed to have convinced himself that he's part of the reason why the Democratic Party lost in 2016. Well, in 2019 and 2020, Bernie Sanders decided to give the nomination a second time run. Again, second time, Bernie Sanders had his candidacy literally stolen from him. And I'm kind of frustrated that he just sat there and take it, and he just took it. But there were some bright sides in 2018 with with AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Presley, Ilhan Omar winning. Democratic Socialists, self-avowed DSA members winning in the U.S. House. And in 2020, you had Cori Bush, you had Jamal Bowman, and several others that expanded the size of the squad. And from my perspective, I'm glad that they were elected. I have some criticisms for them, the way I do for Bernie Sanders as well, which I'll get to in a moment. But between 2016 and 2020, the national conversation about socialism or social democracy kind of came back for the first time in decades over issues that are considered mainstream in the other developed capitalist Western democracies, such as universal health care, fighting for single payer health care, Medicare for all here in the United States. That became a mainstream issue. Free college became a mainstream issue. Green New Deal became a mainstream issue. $15 hour minimum wage became a mainstream issue. And even issues such as getting out of these neocon wars, which is pretty damn bipartisan in a lot of ways these days. There are Democrats and Republicans who are on the same page on getting out of these neocon wars, and these candidates, including Bernie Sanders, are in favor of it. Anyway, I do have frustrations and criticisms over Bernie. I have a problem with Bernie Sanders capitulating to the establishment a whole lot. I do. I have a problem with him endorsing corporate Democrats in a knee-jerk way. I mean, in 2016, when he said, they asked him, you endorse Hillary Clinton if Hillary Clinton gets the nomination? Oh, of course I will. Or in 2020, he was being interviewed. You think Joe Biden could beat Donald Trump? Oh, of course I can. Of course, Joe Biden can beat Donald Trump. It was kind of like, and then unlike in 2016, 2020, he decided to be just another Democrat in some ways. And he downplayed some of his economic populist radicalism. And in some areas, he decided to be more woke than usual. And it was just a bad combination. Plus, the underhand nature of President Obama making some phone calls, urging some of the major candidates, Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar, to drop out, and keeping Elizabeth Warren in the primaries to hurt Bernie Sanders in Massachusetts. And when John Lewis died during the memorial, where they were doing their testimonies and everything in the funeral, Bill Clinton told, what is the name of that guy from, the congressman from South Carolina. I cannot think of his name. Good gracious, what is his name? I'm going to find out. And I apologize. I don't know the name of that congressman from South Carolina. Carolina Congress. I'm sorry. This is unprofessional on my part. It really is unprofessional on my part. Let's see. I can remember. See. Jim Clyburn. I'm sorry. It was kind of fuzzy. When Bill Clinton congratulated Jim Clyburn for interfering in South Carolina and turning the race around in Joe Biden's favor, I mean, I was really upset. And as I said, with Bernie Sanders, yes, Trump is a bad guy. We all get it. But the Trump derangement syndrome, the orange man is bad. We get it. We get it. I mean, the man did the insurrection in January 6th. He showed his authoritarian true colors this year. Donald Trump did. So we get it. Orange man bad. The Russian collusion. I mean, that Hillary Clinton, using Hillary Clinton's talking points about Russian collusion. Remember, not only Donald Trump was accused of Russian collusion. They said that about Jill Stein. They said that about Tulsi Gabbard. They said that about Bernie Sanders. It's the Russians, the Russians, the Russians. And speaking of Tulsi Gabbard, while I have been disappointed on her on several grounds lately, um, she's not fully the person I thought she was in many ways. Tulsi Gabbard's position on foreign policy in the 2020 primary was actually a little bit better than Bernie Sanders, which is, I still would say that if Bernie Sanders would have won, I still would have advocated having her in a spot in the administration, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, UN ambassador, somewhere where foreign policy, I think the Tulsi Gabbard would be awesome at. Now, the team playing that Bernie Sanders has done, I understand that to a degree, but knee-jerkingly voting for Obamacare, I mean, I understand his health care plan is better than the Affordable Care Act. It's superior to the Affordable Care Act. No reason to go and support the Affordable Care Act, because the Affordable Care Act perpetuate what is shitty about the American healthcare system, primarily private health insurance. Um, Voting for the CARES Act, I'm mixed on it. On one hand, I am offended that he voted for it being one other person, just another person that voted for this plan to transfer $4.5 trillion to the super wealthy. But at the same time, there was a $1,200 check that came to the American people, to many American people. And it was a tough call as far as the morality of voting for this CARES Act one way or the other. I'm for the Americans having the $1,200. I was not for corporations having the $4.5 trillion. In the 2020 primaries for U.S. Senate, when Ed Markey of Massachusetts was challenged by Joe Kennedy, Elizabeth Warren did the right thing and endorsed Ed Markey. AOC did the right thing, endorsed Ed Markey. But because Ed Markey didn't endorse Bernie Sanders in the primaries in the previous year or earlier that year, he had a sour grapes attitude and decided that he was just going to stay out of this race. You don't do that. I wish that Bernie Sanders would have endorsed what was his name, Shaheed Buttar against Nancy Pelosi down in San Francisco. Same thing for AOC. So I mean, there are legitimate criticisms I have for Bernie Sanders, and yes, I cheerlead too much for Bernie Sanders for my own damn good, because for all the negative criticisms I have of Bernie Sanders, what he's done a whole lot in the past kind of made up for it. But those criticisms and areas where he fumbled are legitimate areas of criticism. When I was in the Socialist Party USA, the Socialist Party USA criticized Bernie Sanders for bullshit reasons. In mainstream politics, the Democratic Party establishment criticizes Bernie Sanders for the most bullshit of reasons. I respect the SPUA's criticisms of Bernie Sanders more than I do mainstream normie Democrats who criticizes Bernie Sanders. But the thing about it is, there are legitimate areas where you can criticize Bernie Sanders, where people like the late Peter Diamondstone was full of shit, and so was Hillary Clinton today, full of shit. It's not too often I will put Hillary Clinton and Peter Diamondstone in the same sentence. Let me continue. But there is a legacy of Bernie Sanders, what I like to call classic Bernie Sanders, the civil rights era, where he went to the March for Jobs and Freedom in Washington, D.C., where Martin Luther King delivered his I Have a Dream speech, where Bernie Sanders, that classic photo of Bernie Sanders getting arrested for fighting against segregation in Chicago, where the police is actually arresting him. Bernie Sanders, after college, he He moved to Israel for a few years, lived in a kibbutz, and doing that socialist communal thing that they do in the kibbutz, and then moved back to the United States and ended up moving into rural Vermont, where he could kind of do his little hippie thing and continue his little hippie life. So he ended up joining a political party called the Liberty Union Party, which was the political vehicle of the late Peter Dynaston when they were allies and were working together. I do not know what it was all about, but Bernie Sanders resigned from the Liberty Union Party in 1977. Between 72 and 77, Bernie Sanders ran for various offices, for governor, for U.S. senator, for U.S. House, state legislature, you name it. He ran for various offices between 72 and 77 of the Liberty Union Party, but they were not getting anywhere, so he decided to become independent. And in 1981, he became a mayor of Burlington, Vermont. And from 1981 to 89, he was considered a damn good mayor of that city. Unemployment was gone. The standard of living went high. Public services were expanded, and it was just Burlington became a very, very nice place to live. Now he's not without his controversies, and this is the controversies by the right, which they like to lambaste him for being a socialist, and they conflate the term socialism with communism. Now, Bernie Sanders did, for what I can tell, Bernie Sanders did experiment with Trotskyism at one point. I think he was either with the Socialist Workers Party at one point or was a fellow traveler of the Socialist Workers Party. But unlike the cult that the SWP became eventually, it was at a time when, even though it's not my cup of tea politically, there was a time where the Socialist Workers Party were, they were not that bad, even though I am the furthest thing from a Trotskyist. Um, he he made some faintly positive praises as the mayor of Burlington about Cuba and Nicaragua in the 1980s, referring to their health program, the literacy program, getting rid of homelessness, what have you. And I am pretty much your typical, um, knee jerk, almost Cold War era of anti anti-communist revisionist myself. I mean, I don't favor bombing other countries, invading other countries. I'm a pacifist. I'm what you call a third camp internationalist, and I'll go into what that is later on. I neither favor capitalism nor communism, but the thing about it is that yeah, objectively speaking, I mean, the one good thing that exists under most communist countries is everybody has free healthcare, free education, that sort of thing. That's not a bad thing, and that's no more controversial than taxpayer-funded roads. That I mean, it's no more controversial than that. So he was criticized for that, and it's unfair to criticize him for that. I mean, I hear conservatives say they don't like what Pinochet did in Chile, but they like the fact that he allowed the Milton Friedman economic team to run that country. Well, you could turn around and say, hey, what you doing supporting a dictator like Pinochet of Chile? Bernie Sanders was unfairly criticized most of all because when he got married in 1988 to his second wife, Jane, they spent their honeymoon in Moscow, what was then the old Soviet Union. Now, the old Soviet Union, they're like, what's Bernie Sanders doing? Spending his honeymoon in Moscow. Does he love communism or something? No. Bernie Sanders his visit to Moscow was no different than Ronald Reagan visiting Moscow back then. You have to understand, in 1988, around that time, late 87, early 1988, the Soviet Union and the United States, their relations were improving. The Cold War was still alive, but it was stalling. It was the relationship. It was moving toward the end of the Cold War at the time. and that Bernie Sanders was doing a goodwill tour while spending his honeymoon in Moscow. Now, there was during the Cold War, it was not against the law for Americans to occasionally visit the Soviet Union. Anybody could visit the Soviet Union back then. It was not against the law, even though they were our enemies. We could go and visit them. And whether it's Russia under communism, even though the communism of Gorbachev was pretty much on its way out, or whether it was under Boris Yeltsin after Gorbachev, where Russia was legitimately democratic for a few years, or whether it's under Vladimir Putin, who is a dictator, but more of a dictator on the right wing end of the political spectrum today. Either way, whatever positions, Russia's an interesting country to visit. I mean, it's obviously the beautiful architecture, the culture. I mean, to visit those cathedrals in that country, the language itself. I mean, the history of the Russian people. I mean, all that's interesting. Why wouldn't you want to visit it? I mean, and I traveled abroad. I've never been to Russia, but I traveled abroad, and it's always interesting to see all these things. I mean, just because a country might have a bad government doesn't mean that there's aspects of the culture that must be rejected or what have you. I mean, that's ridiculous. So yes, I justify what Bernie Sanders did in 1988 when he and his wife went to what was the former Soviet Union, what was going to be just simply Russia or the Russian Federation several years later. But he gets criticism for that. But yeah, not from me. And I don't care who you are. I mean, you could be Jesse Helms and gone to the Soviet Union. It would have been okay with me. That's how uncontroversial and how bullshit it is when the right wing and the Republican Party hacks want to go after Bernie Sanders. And frankly, some Democrats do too. Some Democrats want to red bait Bernie Sanders too. And as I said, which is bullshit. So, and when people criticizes him when he says, "I favor the Nordic model, Norway, Sweden, Denmark," they'll be like, "You mean you favor Venezuela?" No, I favor the Norwegian, Swedish, and Danish model. Oh, so you favor what they did in Russia? No, I favor the Norwegian, Swedish, and Danish model. Oh, you want to turn America into North Korea? I mean, when Bernie Sanders said Norway, Sweden, Denmark, he means Norway, Sweden, Denmark. Yeah, they're not socialist countries, but they are free market systems, some way more free market than the United States. But they do have what the United States doesn't really have: viable labor parties, viable social democratic parties that get in power and they humanize and make capitalism more humane. And so to criticize Bernie Sanders over this is ridiculous. There are legitimate criticism of Bernie Sanders, but overall his record's been very positive, and that's why he's an inspiration to me. But I sort of wish that he returned back to the classic Bernie Sanders of the past and thumb his nose at the Democratic Party establishment and go back to the way it was at one time. I ranted long enough. If you like what you heard, press like, comment. If you hate it, comment anyway. We'll have a conversation. Uh, Feel free to share the content on this channel. As the First Amendment absolutist, it's my duty to inform you, to create your platform, especially if you're passionate. Utilize it because we're the muckrakers of our time. Hit that subscription button, that notification bell. Help make this channel grow. And until next time, I'm American Social Democracy. And even though I'm saying maybe it's time we ought to move beyond Bernie, just to piss off the hardcore Republican right and to piss off the corporate Democrats. And even in the days in SPUSA, when people like Peter Diamondstone make me mad, those on the sectarian, kooky fringe hard left that hated Bernie Sanders. I have to say to all three of them, peace and Bernie Sanders for president in the year 2024. Good day.